We've been waiting for the pushback. We've been waiting for the people on the streets. There have been a few demonstrations. There was a demonstration on Wall Street in Chicago and these kinds of things. There have been some things that have occurred, but this is the pushback. This is finally it.
This is the start of a great pushback against those forces in our society that would diminish our jobs, our unions, our communities. And people really are going to get organized and come out en masse in ways that they haven't for a long time. Then this will be remembered as a very historic turning point. There's only a few points in history where our political life and our economic life become very, very intertwined. And those are always the most intense moments. Of folks who were deeply concerned about the direction of the country. Many of them voted for the Republican Party, and you saw a radical swing in 2010. Many of them came into power at the state level as new governors. One of those new governors, Scott Walker, and one of the first things that Walker decided to do was to eliminate, or at least dramatically undermine, the collective bargaining rights of public employee unions.
It was amazing. It was amazing because people on the streets, I mean, average working people, got this immediately. They got that it was a national assault, even though it was starting here in Wisconsin.
There was a sense that when an assault was being made on public sector workers, instead of dividing people, you saw this massive uprising. Now initially it was, a few dozen people, then a few hundred, but within very short order, you had 100,000, 125,000, perhaps even at one of the most recent rallies, 150,000 people out in the streets protesting against an assault on public employees and their unions.
So describe the effect of the crisis on me. Well, I am not a state worker, and so I'm not directly affected in that fashion. But for me personally as a journalist, this has just been an amazing time. And we started live blogging on our site, which is prwatch.org, on the very first day. And we had a team of 5 people that live blogged practically every event and every move and every news release. And we just put up lots of videos and post pictures, and we tried to give people a flavor of what was going on. And many websites across the country, thousands and thousands of websites, picked up our blog. So from a journalist perspective, it was a really very good news story and a very exciting time to see this type of completely spontaneous uprising.
Well, I cover politics and public life, and so this crisis had the effect on me of sort of supercharging what I do. I've been covering social movements for a long time and been very, very interested in them. So I would have been out there and intrigued by what was happening if 1,000 people showed up. The fact that it was 100,000 or 125 or even 150,000, that just made it a much more dramatic story. It seemed like the whole world wanted to connect into something of Madison, and because I had done a lot of commentary for international and domestic media, a lot of people called me for Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman, for MSNBC with Ed Schultz, for CNN, a host of other shows, Hardball, all sorts of international shows, BBC, Al Jazeera, Jamaican public radio.
How does my job differ? Because I do a lot of reporting at home from people who are directly affected and have to take to the streets. Well, we did take to the streets. We stood in the cold for many, many weeks, and we did a lot of reporting from inside the Capitol and outside the Capitol.
I think there's a difference between the role of a journalist or a commentator and that of the individuals whose lives are directly affected. There's clearly an emotional component for a lot of those folks, that they are very, very worried about what comes next, and their presence there is an attempt to make a demand on power. My role is different in the sense that in some senses I'm an observer of it. By the same token, I'm a native Wisconsinite. I was born and raised in this state, and I've never ever hesitated to say that for me there's a great passion, a great emotion involved in questions about what my state will be and how it will take shape.
I know this state from top to bottom. I love this state more than any in the nation. It is the greatest state in this country. But I have never been prouder of Wisconsin than I
going into this struggle, anybody would have known that I was going to be strongly on the side of the workers and strongly on the side of communities that are trying to maintain their public services, maintain public education. That's a place that I've come from throughout my life as a writer. Most of the books I've done have related to democracy issues and questions of how people can best engage with society and politics to influence it.
Michael Moore nailed it when he came out here and said, "You have awakened a sleeping giant, the working people of America," and their message is that we have had it.
All of America thanks you. Thank you, Wisconsin. Unbelievable.
But I do have a sense that it's bigger than just what's happened here. And we won't know the full answer to that for years. But we may look back on this and say that these weeks in Madison in early 2011 were a critical turning point for the Republic. And if that's the case, I think there's a very good chance America would be a better place for it, because an engaged citizenry, a passionate citizenry that goes out in the streets and makes demands of power, that's a good thing. Every country should have that. And if it started in Madison and goes out across the country and becomes a part of our civic life in the years and decades to come, fabulous. I hope that is the story.
Get up, stand up for your right. Get up, stand up for your right.